Hello everyone, today we'll discuss about homeostasis. Homeostasis, the word means a state of balance in the body. It is also defined as maintenance of constant or static condition in the internal environment. The term homeostasis was given by W.B. Cannon. Another terminology, that is internal environment, which is also known as milieu interior. The term was given by Claude Bernard. And here, what is internal environment or milieu interior? All cells, they live in the same constant environment that is made up of extracellular fluid, which is known as internal environment. Multicellular organisms, they have perfectly organized as well as controlled internal environment. Homeo, that is same, and stasis, that is standing. Now, what makes our internal environment? Internal environment is a water-based medium in which our body cells, they exist. Our body cells, they are bathed in the fluid which is known as interstitial fluid. Oxygen and nutrients, they pass from the internal transport system through the interstitial fluid and reach to the cell. And waste products, they are produced from the cell. They move through interstitial fluid to transport system and then it is to be excreted. So internal environment is mainly made up of extracellular fluid, which has two parts. Major part, that is interstitial fluid, the fluid between the cell, and second one, that is plasma, which is a fluid part of blood. Now you can see here, constituents from the intracellular fluid, they pass to the interstitial fluid, then they pass to the plasma and then to the organs, and then they reach to the external environment. So, you can see exchange and communication, they are key concepts for understanding physiological homeostasis. Now, as we have discussed, extracellular fluid consists of blood and interstitial fluid, and it contains nutrients as well as ions, oxygen, carbon dioxide and other substances which are required for the survival of the cell. Whenever there is deviation in this internal environment from the set point, our body suffers from malfunction. Now, what is this set point? Value of variable that fluctuates around a point, and the point is known as set point. Therefore, set point is the ideal normal value of variable. For example, set point for the body temperature, that is about 37 degrees Celsius. Set point for blood pH, that is 7.38 to 7.42. Now, homeostasis explains various physiological functions. How? Whenever there is deviation from this set point, or you can say the value of variable, this set point changes, they are detected by the detectors, or they are also known as sensors. You can see here in the diagram. Whenever condition in the body change from the set point, this one, there is corrective mechanism that send this information to the center, and this centers, they correct. This is corrective mechanism that is achieved, and the change is returned back to normal. Again, in this example also you can see the same thing. You can see whenever there is imbalance, whenever there is a stimulus which produces change in the variable. Now, the change that is detected by the receptor or sensor. Now, this information from the sensor, that is transmitted through the afferent pathway to the controlling center, and output information they send to the effector, and effector, they produce the response and bring the balance back to normal. Now, various factors, they are involved in the maintenance of internal environment or homeostasis. First and foremost, that is pH balance. pH of extracellular fluid is about 7.38 to 7.42. When the pH decreases below 7.38, that is acidosis, and increase in the pH above 7.42 is alkalosis. pH balance is regulated by buffer systems. There are mainly three varieties of buffer systems in our body. One is body fluid buffer mechanism, second, that is respiratory buffer mechanism, and third, that is renal buffer system. You can see here in this diagram, this is the normal pH range, and whenever the pH deviates from its normal range, that affects the homeostasis. Second is water and electrolyte balance, that is required to be regulated to prevent the dehydration, that is decrease in the water content or water toxicity. Water and electrolyte balance is regulated by kidneys, skin, salivary gland and digestive tract. Body temperature regulation. Normal body temperature is about 37.5 degrees Celsius. Why the body temperature regulation is required? Because of enzymatic activities, they are maximum at particular temperature. And when body temperature deviates from this range, that affects our enzymatic activities. Body temperature is regulated by skin, respiratory system, digestive system, excretory system and nervous system. For body temperature regulation, we have regulating centers in the hypothalamus. As we know, human being is a homeothermic animal and the body temperature is regulated in a normal range, and that is the set point. In our hypothalamus, we have two sets of centers, one that is heat loss center and second that is heat gain center. Heat loss centers, they are present in the preoptic nucleus. You can see here anterior group of nuclei, one of the nucleus that is preoptic nucleus, which has heat loss center. These centers, they are sensitive to heat, and when they are stimulated, they decrease the body temperature by following mechanisms. They increase the sweat production, they cause cutaneous vasodilatation and loss of heat, and they decrease the heat production. Now, next is heat gain centers. They are situated in the posterior hypothalamus and they are sensitive to cold. And whenever body temperature decreases, they are stimulated and they increase body temperature by decreasing heat loss and increasing heat production. Another homeostatic mechanism is supply of nutrients and oxygen as well as enzymes and hormones. For that, digestive system and circulatory systems, they play an important role. Transport of nutrient, metabolic waste products and gases, we require blood and circulatory system. Then removal of metabolic and other waste product, we have excretory organs. Now, which are our excretory systems as well as organs? One that is digestive system, which excrete undigested food particles as well as bacteria and toxins. Lungs, they excrete carbon dioxide and water vapors. Liver excretes bile pigments, also excretes bacteria, toxic substances, heavy metals and drugs. Skin excretes water, salts and some other waste, and kidneys, they excrete water soluble waste products. Next is regulation of body function. For that, we have nervous system and endocrine system. Nervous system is important for the immediate regulation of body function. For example, if we have touched a hot flame, we immediately withdraw our hand. That is the function of nervous system, that is a reflex action. Nervous system again is of two varieties, central and peripheral nervous system. Central nervous system include brain and spinal cord, and peripheral nervous system includes nerves. Autonomic nervous system, that is other part of the nervous system which is important for vegetative function. They are vital and that is also required for homeostasis. Reproductive system. Although if the reproductive organs are not functioning properly, the person or the individual survives, but the reproductive system is important for the continuation of species. Musculoskeletal system, that is important for motility, and the motility is required for shelter, for food, as well as to move away from adverse surrounding. Now, water balance. How the water balance is regulated in our body. You can see here normal water content of the blood. When water content decreases, suppose after sweating, there is concentration. Blood gets concentrated, and when blood gets concentrated, what happens? Large portion of the water is reabsorbed from kidney tubules and formation of concentrated urine, and thus normal content of blood is achieved. Next is, if suppose water content increases, for example after drinking large amount of water, suppose we have taken 2 liters of water, so what happens? There is dilution of blood, and that results in small portion of the water reabsorption and formation of dilute urine. That results in again normal content of the blood. Now we discuss about components of homeostatic system. Here there are detectors or sensors as we have discussed. Whenever there is deviation from the normal set point, detectors or sensors, they detect the deviation. This information is transmitted through sensors, and through sensors it reaches to the controlling center, which acts through effector and brings the change back to normal. Now, mechanism of action of homeostatic mechanism. Homeostatic mechanisms, they maintain normalcy of various body systems. How? By changing the behavior pattern of any system. They inhibit the change by effector and they bring the change back to normal. So you can say feedback, that is simply output signal passed back to input signals. There are three varieties of homeostatic control systems. One is negative feedback mechanism, second is positive feedback mechanism, and third is adaptive control. Now, negative feedback mechanism, whenever some factor becomes excessive or deficient, control system initiates negative feedback. Means there are series of changes they occur. These changes, they result in return the factor towards a normal and thus maintain homeostasis. So you can say output signals, they arrest the change or reverse the change made by input signals, and they inhibit the input signals. So by this way they correct the excessive stimulation by the input signal and they stabilize their own function for the homeostasis. You can see here in this diagram, this is negative feedback mechanism. Normal value, when it rises above the normal, corrective mechanism by negative feedback brings the value back to normal. Same way, when the normal value falls below the normal, corrective mechanism through negative feedback brings the value back to normal. And this way, various body systems, they work together by this feedback mechanism to maintain homeostasis. Another example is, you can see here thyroid hormones T3 and T4. Secretion of T3 and T4 is regulated by TSH from anterior pituitary, and TSH secretion is regulated by hypothalamic TRH. Now, what happens when T3 and T4 level increases? You can see in the diagram, this T3 and T4, they give negative feedback effect to the pituitary TSH, as well as this T3 and T4, they give negative feedback effect to the hypothalamic TRH secretion, and thus they regulate their own secretion. Same way here, body temperature regulation. When body temperature rises above the normal, various nervous signals, they result in vasodilatation as well as sweating, and therefore the body temperature comes back to normal. Same way, when body temperature falls below the normal, nervous signals, they result in constriction of the blood vessels and they conserve the heat and they bring the body temperature back to normal. Now, what is feedback gain? Feedback gain determines degree of effectiveness of this control system. Efficacy of the negative feedback system is greater when the gain is more. Now, how can we calculate the gain? That is equal to correction upon error. Now, example, you can see here, suppose normal mean arterial pressure is 100 mm of mercury, and whenever there is hemorrhage, suppose 1.5 liters of blood is lost, then if the baroreceptor system is not working, then the pressure falls to 50 mmHg. And when the baroreceptor mechanisms, they are working, instead of that the pressure falls to 75. So you can see here, correction by the baroreceptor mechanism is minus 25. Instead of 50, the pressure is 75. But if the baroreceptors are working, still the error is 25. So you can say gain is equal to correction divided by error, and that is equal to minus 1. Same way, another example is, suppose we have transfused large volume of blood to a person in which baroreceptor mechanism is not functioning. So what happens? Mean arterial pressure rises from 100 mm of mercury to 175 mm of mercury. Same amount of volume, when it is transfused to the person in which baroreceptor system is working, then arterial pressure rises from 100 mm of mercury to 125 mm of mercury. So you can say here, correction is minus 50 mm of mercury and error is 25 mm of mercury, and the gain is minus 2. Next feedback mechanism, that is positive feedback mechanism, which is also known as vicious cycle. Here, output signals, they amplify or they increase the intensity of the input signal. Negative feedback mechanisms are more common. Here positive feedback are less common. And examples are blood clotting, nerve signal transmission and delivery of baby. As well as hemorrhagic shock also, that is a result of positive feedback. Whenever there is severe hemorrhage, venous return to the heart decreases, and as the venous return decreases, cardiac output also decreases, which results in decrease in the blood pressure. And when the blood pressure decreases, coronary blood flow is reduced, and coronary blood flow reduction decreases the cardiac contractility, and when the cardiac contractility decreases, it ultimately decreases in the cardiac output. So this is a positive feedback. Action potential or nerve impulse transmission. Whenever there is depolarization of the cell, means the cell membrane potential becomes positive, there is increase in the sodium permeability, and because of sodium influx, cell membrane potential becomes less negative, and when the membrane potential becomes less negative, it increases the sodium permeability. Next is parturition. You can see here. During parturition, baby's head stretches the cervix of the uterus, you can see, and when the cervix is stretched, impulses are transmitted through the stretching of the cervix to the posterior pituitary and hypothalamus, and it releases oxytocin, and this oxytocin increases uterine contraction, and with increase in the uterine contraction, stretching of the cervix further increases. Okay. So now this positive feedback mechanism continues till the stimulus is there. Means when the baby is delivered, then the positive feedback loop gets stopped. Next is delayed negative feedback. That is also known as adaptive control. Some movements of the body, they occur so rapidly that there is no enough time for the nerve signal to travel from peripheral part of the body to the brain and then back to the peripheral part of the body. Therefore, brain uses a principle which is known as feed forward control. Here what happens, sensory signals from the moving part reaches to the brain, and if the movement is correct, then signals are transmitted that it is correct. But if the movement is not correct, brain corrects the movement by feed forward signals, and these signals are sent to the muscle, and next time the movement which is required is corrected. So at the same time the correction is not made, but next time the correction is made, and that is known as adaptive control, and it is a delayed type of negative feedback. So here it completes our feedback mechanism and homeostasis. Thank you.